with the team. So, Ryan, you've been a player in the Steelers locker room. What are you thinking at this point about your quarterback situation after the draft?
That they better have either the steel curtain or the 2008 Steelers defense if they want to be a team that can be near 500. Listen, they put themselves in an extremely difficult situation, whether it was waiting on Aaron Rodgers or not addressing it in free agency or not picking someone in the draft before they picked Will Howard that could be a viable starter for this year. When you look at the plan that Omar Khan has put in place, I don't believe this allows you to compete with the Baltimore Ravens or the Cincinnati Bengals, even the Cleveland Browns improving, and we know how good that AFC is. This could be the first losing season of Mike Tomlin's tenure as Pittsburgh's head coach.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, here we go again. As a defensive player, I'm starting to get ready, lift these weights and run these hills. And I'm like, here we go again. Like, how are we going to score more than 17 points? Like, so why am I out here busting my behind, running, trying to get bigger, faster, stronger? And y'all going to get a 42-year-old off the beach with a blanket around his shoulders to play quarterback for us. Like, at some point, y'all got to help me help you. And so I'm just saying to myself, like, here we go again. Are we going to do this one more time?
But you're right on it, bro. Which is why for the black community that think I hate Shedeur Sanders is why I thought he should have went 21, which I talked about ad nauseum.
You did.
Because I did think he was the second best quarterback in this draft. But also, if you are the Pittsburgh Steelers and you have a higher grade on another quarterback, why you ain't take them at 21? Why we gotta wait? Like, you knew Mason Rudolph wouldn't answer. Everybody in the world know that. Right? We look at the rest of the quarter. Hopefully, they hoping Will Howard turn into a Tom Brady situation and he surprise them is all I can assume. But this waffling at this quarterback position that's been going on for so long in Pittsburgh is starting to grow weary on these fans. And me and RC talked about it during the draft. What are they going to do to not only instill some hope at that position, but more importantly, reinvigorate the dudes in that locker room? You go get receivers in DK Metcalf, and you don't have anybody to get them the ball consistently. If it ain't Aaron Rodgers, which y'all know I said I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, I think they should have took one of these quarterbacks, which I thought would be Shedeur at 21.
Yeah, look, the profile of the guy that they have ultimately is going to be important, Marcus, because of the thing that you just alluded to. Look, DK Metcalf and George Pickkins, do they come across as the kind of guys that are going to take real kindly to a quarterback who can't get them the rock on a consistent basis? I think that's going to bode well for their football team. I'm just asking. You know what I mean?
They're going to beat him up. They're going to beat him up.
They need to make sure. They just need to make sure that dude is that dude. And look, Mason Rudolph has played a role in this league for a long time, and he'll continue to play that role. But it's a role. They need a franchise quarterback. And now they painted themselves into a corner, and it's either Aaron Rodgers to me or bust, or otherwise, exactly as RC said, you're looking at a real troubling season, I believe.
On Shedeur was the Steelers. Here's a look at their draft. They had just 2 picks in the top 120. They took Oregon defensive tackle Derek Harmon in the first round, and then running back Caleb Johnson in the third round. 4 of their final 5 picks were on the defensive side of the ball. The lone exception, quarterback Will Howard in the 6th round. He joins Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson in the QB room. Adam, the Steelers said they would be adding 2 quarterbacks. We saw them from the draft. They drafted Will Howard. What are their plans from here?
Well, there's one, and I think they're hoping and thinking and believing that the last one will be Aaron Rodgers. Art Rooney, the owner of the team, said over the weekend that he still is optimistic that Aaron Rodgers was going to wind up in Pittsburgh, hopefully sooner rather than later. But there is patience within the organization. Mike Tomlin, the Steelers head coach, has not been in any rush to get a decision from Aaron Rodgers, but really the Steelers are the last team that remains that needs a quarterback here for the upcoming season, and Aaron Rodgers clearly would like to continue playing, though he said on the Pat McAfee show he hadn't made that decision just yet. But it's a situation where I think the Steelers believe ultimately he'll come around, he'll wind up opting to play, and he'll wind up opting to play in Pittsburgh. The other team that seemingly interested Aaron Rodgers, the Minnesota Vikings, traded for Sam Howell over the weekend. They would seem to have satisfied their need for another quarterback with Sam Howell and that acquisition. And now that leaves the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Aaron Rodgers waiting to join forces. It still could be a little while before he signs it, but I think the belief within the organization is that he still will come around and wind up this season in Pittsburgh.
All right, so we keep waiting for that. Adam. Mina, what do you think of how the Steelers approached the draft, only taking Will Howard in the 6th round?
I would have taken a quarterback earlier, just to be blunt. I don't begrudge them skipping on quarterback in the 1st round. I actually love the Derek Harmon pick, player I really liked at a position of need for them. But after that, they had a couple of opportunities, I think, to take a swing on one. Jalen Milroe in the 3rd round. They took a running back, Caleb Johnson. And then in the 4th, instead of taking Sanders, they took Jack Sawyer, who gives them edge depth. But the way I see it, Laura, if you're a team without a long-term answer at quarterback, and I think we can agree even if the Steelers add Aaron Rodgers, they still don't have a long-term answer. You got to take some swings. People say, well, they can go for it next year. Well, frankly, we're talking about a team that never picks in the top 10 because they don't lose that many games. And they're also in a division that just loaded up on draft picks for next year. So I don't see that as a plan. I don't see Aaron Rodgers as a long-term plan. And I just wish they had been a little bit more aggressive at the position.
I thought the Steelers' intentions or their feelings about Shedeur Sanders became crystal clear for me at pick 83 in the 3rd round. When they didn't take him at 21, you're saying to yourself, I get you, Derek Harmon's an excellent player who led all FBS defensive tackles and pressures last season. That is one where it's a premium need for them in a premium position, even if not at the level of quarterback. Once they bypassed Shedeur Sanders at 83, the message to me was very obvious. We're not interested in this player. We just don't view him as a draftable quarterback at this point, which probably means their grade for him is below that of a starter level. So I was actually okay at that point with them waiting until the 6th round because I didn't think the gap between Will Howard and a lot of the quarterbacks that went ahead of him was really a gap at all. As a matter of fact, I had Wills with a 3rd round grade in this draft, so I thought it was a good investment for Pittsburgh. I just am most nervous about this is that, there's a lot of optimism repeatedly from the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise. What's the wait, though? I mean, this has been multiple months of Aaron Rodgers seemingly having one suitor left over and no deal has been put to paper. Again, it's not like there's mini camps or training camp that he's missed out on, J-Mag, but still, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, if it can't get done, we're not in the era where he needs to go, you just sign a signature on whatever, an iPad, and we're good to go, I thought.
Well, and Adam just said, it could take a lot longer. I know how I would feel if I were in that locker room, but if you're a player in the Steelers locker room right now and this is your quarterback situation, how are you feeling?
You're sitting around waiting for that first team meeting and you're kind of looking at each other, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and it feels like deja vu where you're continuing to go in. And this year, very different than last year where there was some hope behind Justin Fields and Russell Wilson that they were going to be able to come help you or possibly save you. Didn't work out. Now you're going into this season and even going into draft weekend, I think for the players in that locker room, you didn't think you were going to walk away with a quarterback that was going to come in as a rookie and lead this team in that division to continue to win a ton of games. So you're feeling very uneasy, and you're kind of hoping that Rodgers does decide to sign and come play for your football team because you don't like the prospects, even of a guy like Will Howard, who was a champion in college. You don't expect him to come in and win games right away. So it'd be nice to have a veteran in Rodgers.
Quickly, what about Kirk Cousins? Should they be trying to if the Falcons would make him available?
That's very interesting. An older quarterback, but a guy that you take away this past season where he was injured coming off a down year, he has been very accomplished in this league, and he'd be a veteran in that locker room. So, if you're a player, there's not your money. Absolutely. Throw some draft picks at him, throw some money, and bring him on to Pittsburgh.
Well, that'd be interesting if the players could control who they got. All right, we've got some news today, of course. George Kittle gets a big deal. This is great to see. Kittle, of course, a fan favorite for many reasons. 4 years, $76.4 million. Contract extension, of course, includes $40 million guaranteed. And Kittle has been an important weapon for Brock Purdy. Purdy ranks second in QBR, second in yards per attempt, and has thrown the 3rd most completions of at least 25 yards among quarterbacks with at least 150 attempts to a single receiver. They also have added 20 touchdowns together, since Kittle entered the NFL in 2017. He ranks top 3 in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns among tight ends. Tim, how important was it for San Francisco to get this deal done with Kittle?
Look, I think it's a big deal. We saw, a year ago as the injury bug, and some disgruntled employees, hit the San Francisco 49ers. Look, quarterback is still a dependent position. And especially when you think about, guys that that don't just overpower you with their physical ability. That's Purdy. He can play at a really high level. He can create offense and all of that. But having good players around you matters when you play this position. So, Kittle is one of those guys. He's good in the run game for the Niners. He's excellent in the passing game. He brings an attitude that I think is infectious to that football team. So there's a lot of reasons that you look at it and you say, yeah, look, it makes sense to keep and pay and reward guys like that that have meant what he's already meant to that organization.
Yeah, the attitude is a huge part. I played against George Kittle. I was 2020, and I think I was ready to retire after that game because you talk about how he plays and how he exemplifies who the San Francisco 49ers are, and that goes a long way for Brock Purdy. And you look at this team in the NFC, I think that window is still a little bit, it's cracked open for them right now, but you look at some of the other teams in the NFC. We watched, obviously, the Eagles win the Super Bowl. We saw the Rams take them down to the last few plays, and then the Commanders and the Lions. We saw what they had and what Jaden Daniels is going to become. So as much as you may still like the San Francisco 49ers roster with some of the stars that they still have, I don't know if Brock Purdy is enough to elevate this team to where they need to go in the NFC to be true contenders.
I'll take it a step further. And I get it that you have to, have this optimism, but based on what we've known San Francisco to be, and watching them go to NFC championship after NFC championship and Super Bowl, the window is closed. And the window is not closed because they can't compete. The window is closed, J-Mac, because of what you said. It's more people that has entered the fray. And they are no longer the team to beat in the NFC. And I'm not don't take that the wrong way. I'm not casting aspersions. San Francisco is going to be formidable in the NFC. But San Francisco is not going to carry the same cachet that they've carried while we've been doing this job the last 5 to 6 years coming into a season. And it's not only because of what Philly has done, which is the team to beat in the NFC. It's also because more fighters have entered the fray. When you staring at one man, it's a little bit easier than when you start staring at 6 or 7. And you can legitimately talk about that many teams in the NFC now potentially having an opportunity to be Super Bowl champions. So the window is closed when it comes to their dominance, but they still should be a part of that conversation.
It wasn't that long ago that we're talking about, all right, so they got to get Brandon Ayuk's deal done. They do that, but now he's injured. We're not exactly sure the timeline there. Christian McCaffrey, don't know exactly about his health, but as we do bring Adam Schefter back in now, Adam, where do we stand with the quarterback?
Well, they've been talking, Laura. They've been talking since the combine about getting a new deal done. And right now, it doesn't seem close. But I think there's a sense on both sides that both sides want to get it done. And it feels like it's more like a summer deal than it is a deal right now, though anything could change at any moment. I think both sides would be confident that they can get this done by the start of training camp, shortly after the start of training camp, and that Brock Purdy could be tied to San Francisco for a long period of time. That is the hope. That is the goal. That is what both sides are working towards, but they are not there yet, and it may be a little while before they can get there.
Yeah, just a reminder how good he's been. I mean, Brock Purdy ranks 4th in total QBR since he entered the league 3 seasons ago. I'm a little hung up on something, though, Swagoo. Okay, you said there's 6 Super Bowl contenders in the NFC. The Cowboys, one of them? Just trying to do some math here.
No, you're not doing that to me, Boogie. No, they're not.
It's a Tuesday.
Okay?
Why not?
Now, obviously, we got Detroit. We got Green Bay. Okay. Philly has to be in that conversation.
Yep.
The Washington Commanders are in that conversation. All right. And I ain't going to name no more because everybody going to think I'm biased. But they in there.
Wait, you just put the Cowboys back in, I think. All right, you guys at home figure out what he just did. I'm not totally sure. We love you, Swagoo. We're just getting started. Derek Carr confirmed his shoulder injury this week during a guest sermon he gave at a local church. Carr made the public comments in the days immediately following the team drafting quarterback Tyler Shough out of Louisville. So let's get some quick reads from Tim on these in there, starting rookie camp today. Tyler Booker there, of course. And here's a few needs that they address. They ranked 24th in pass. Oh, we're going to hear from Tyler Booker. My bad. Here he is. Here's what he said today.
know that this rookie contract is just, Lord willing, the first of a couple that I have coming in front of me. So I was just focused on getting to work. I wasn't too worried about the little extremities. That's stuff for my age to worry about. So I told her, I was like, look, let's get this thing done. I'm ready to get to work. Like, I always wanted to be a professional football player. I've always wanted to win Super Bowl. So now I'm just worried about helping my team win, being an asset to my team. You know, like yeah, I'm in the NFL now, but like, what am I going to do in the NFL? That's what matters.
Honestly, his sound bites are amazing. Great person. All right, the Cowboys addressed some big team needs in the draft. They ranked 24th in pass block win rate last season, so they drafted Tyler Booker, the guard. With the loss of DeMarcus Lawrence, they drafted edge rusher Donovan Ezaraku, and they ranked second worst in opponents' yard per attempt last season, so they drafted cornerback Siobhan Ravel Jr. And they couldn't run the ball, so they drafted running back Jaden Blue. So there you go. I mean, that makes you feel good. But, Tim, did they do enough in the draft to address all of their issues?
Yeah, no, they didn't. And like, in fairness to the Cowboys, because like you just outlined it great, Laura. Like, when you look at it, it's like, look, there were needs, and then look, and presumably they're drafting good players to fill in, you know, the void and the needs that they have there. Look, when you look at some teams, Cowboys would be one of them. I think there are a couple other teams. Patriots would be one of them. Like, one swing of the hammer is not going to fix it all. Like, it's not going to be one pass through free agency. It's not going to be one pass through the draft that all of a sudden you go, yep, we fix it. You know, so, you know, some of the criticism of, well, you didn't get Dak a wide receiver. It's like, well, if you did get him a receiver, were you going to get him the left guard that you needed to get him? So, listen, I think the Cowboys did a good job. I don't think you can really ever fault them for the talent they bring in. I think they do a nice job of that. I just think we're a team with how things have kind of shaken out and where they are with their quarterback and his contract, that, look, you're going to have to be patient in terms of the turnaround.
Yeah, Tim, Amari Cooper is still out there, a potential fill for that wide receiver 2 spot in Dallas. And I'm told there is at least some mutual interest between the player and the team on a reunion. Now, money will be the sticking point most likely. I'm told Dallas really doesn't want to spend a lot in remaining free agency. Amari Cooper's made almost $140 million, so yeah. I doubt he's going to take a minimum deal at this point. But look, they got the coming weeks and months, see if they can come to some sort of agreement. It looks like he's not going to resign in Buffalo. So I do expect Dallas to sort of comb that market, add at least one offensive piece at some point.
Yeah, D-Wood, is Cooper enough to fill that number 2 spot in Dallas?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's getting up there in age. He's obviously, the Cowboys are very familiar with Amari Cooper, being that he played with the Dallas Cowboys. But listen, Laura, they need someone opposite CeeDee Lamb. It's just been like just barren at the number 2 receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, and it just makes it so much, you know, for opposing defense, makes it easier when you get to scheme up CeeDee Lamb when you don't have a threat opposite him. So whether it's Amari Cooper or or trade or something, they need to address that in order to get the most out of this passing game.
Jeremy, where do things stand with Micah Parsons getting a new deal, by the way?
Well, I'm told Dallas has not ramped up negotiations with Parsons' agent as of yet. So they plan to, they want to. They've essentially budgeted for this. They know what the market is. It's going to be well above $35-40 million per year. But Dallas is uncomfortable waiting. We've seen that with Dak Prescott. He didn't get a deal done until September of last year. CeeDee Lamb late August. Trevon Diggs over the summer.
Trading up to take a quarterback number 1 overall in 2026, which is interesting. Here's their quarterback room right now. They have Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and Deshaun Watson. Plus, they drafted both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders this year. Of course, Dillon Gabriel was drafted before Shedeur. Tim, how do you see things shaking out with this group?
Well, listen, I mean, the reality of it when you see it is like, it's hard for 5th-round draft picks to make the football team. Like, it doesn't matter what your name is, especially at the quarterback position. And then when you look at the lineup, you just outlined, Joe Flacco is going to be the day 1 starter. That's why he's there. But he's also hasn't started, you know, a full season in 7 years. And so Kenny Pickett is very valuable because Kenny Pickett started games for the Super Bowl winning, you know, Philadelphia Eagles a year ago. He's got a tremendous value as a backup in the National Football League. So this idea that, like, oh, hey, you just ship Kenny Pickett off and go with 2 rookie quarterbacks behind Joe Flacco, I don't think that Kevin Stefanski is going to feel great about doing that. And so then I think when you look at, Dillon Gabriel, look, he's a better prospect in the eyes of the Cleveland Browns. They took him 2 rounds earlier than they took Shedeur Sanders. So there aren't enough reps to go around. I think people need to understand this. You could have a period in practice where you have a 14-play 7-on-7 period. Well, like the starter Flacco is going to get 7 of them. Then you're going to have 5, that go to Kenny Pickett, your backup. Well, like you have 2 reps left that probably go to the 3rd guy. So it's hard. I've lived it as the 4th quarterback at times where you're there, you watch practice a lot. You don't even get a chance to prove that you're good enough to make the team. And I think that's the fear if you're Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, listen, I hate to disagree with my fellow Eagle right here, but if you're the Cleveland Browns, first of all, we know what Joe Flacco is at this point in his career. The last time we saw Joe Flacco in the Cleveland Browns uniform, he was out there throwing picks to the opposition, the Houston Texans. We know what he is. Kenny Pickett has been on 3 teams in what, a year time or whatever it is, 2 years. We know what Kenny Pickett is. If you're the Cleveland Browns, you have 2 first-round picks in 2026. I think the priority has to be what we need to evaluate both of our draft picks, both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, to see if either one of those guys can possibly be the quarterback solution. Because if either one of those guys hits, then that just only increases the values of those 2 2026 draft picks in the first round. So I think the focus should be on the rookies. We know what the veterans are right now.
Listen, Wood, I don't disagree with you that your assessment of Flacco and Pickett, I agree with. I think you're right. You also have a staff and an organization that's like, we got to try to win some games, and so we're going to do it with a guy that it went 3 rounds before someone felt comfortable picking him, and a guy that it went 5 rounds before somebody was comfortable picking him. Like, we're going to roll into the season with those 2 guys. And look, I'm not saying that a team can't keep 4 quarterbacks. We've seen it before. At one point, Tom Brady was the 4th quarterback on a roster, behind, Bledsoe, Heward, and Michael Bishop. Like, it can happen. I think that, look, Flacco's there for a reason. They're paying him the way they're paying him for a reason. And Kenny Pickett was acquired because he's proven himself to, at a minimum, be a quality backup. So you just run out of time and reps to evaluate young players at the quarterback position.
So the Browns look at the roster as value through the prism of value and currency. So that could lead to some trade opportunities when you have 4 quarterbacks to recoup some of the picks that they just gave up for Dillon Gabriel, for Shedeur Sanders, that they felt was too good a value in the 5th round to pass up on. They gave up the 5th round pick to get Kenny Pickett in a trade. And so if one of them plays well in the preseason, it could lead to some opportunities somewhere else where they take that number from 4 to 3. And you mentioned Gabriel, Tim. I was told in the draft, even in the days leading up, from other teams, that the Browns were really high on Gabriel and that his ability as a passer and feel for the game, a lot of teams were high on, more so than maybe the media. He's just very small and probably limited as a skill set compared to some other players, but Browns really like the player.
It's interesting. I mean, you never know which teams may end up needing a quarterback that don't need one right now. Things can change for sure, but Tim, I think that view into what it's actually like splitting up reps is really important for people to pay attention to and how they think about all of this. Of course, we'll continue to keep an eye on what the Browns do. Today, let's get some news. What's going on with Trey Hendrickson?
Laura, Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals appear to be at a stalemate on a contract extension. I've checked in on this today, and sides are sort of waiting. Not a lot of movement on this front. The Bengals do want to extend Hendrickson. Hendrickson wants to be a Bengal. They want to work something out, but they know that there is work to do based on this ballooning pass rush market, well above $30 million per year. The Bengals did draft pass rusher Shamar Stewart in the 1st round. That should not affect their Hendrickson plans, I'm told. And you got George Pickkins. Trade talks or any sort of buzz around that has cooled. There was a little bit of smoke out of the draft, but I was told that Pickkins, in the end, wants to be in Pittsburgh. Sort of flirted with a trade request, but in the end, loves Mike Tomlin, wants to be a part of things. And from the Steelers' perspective, they want to keep all their arsenal intact because of the quarterback situation. They want to look attractive with the wide receivers. Well, there you have them. Aaron Rodgers. You like that segue?
I do.
So, I continue to hear that the Steelers remain optimistic here. They passed up on Jackson Dart in the 1st round, a quarterback they liked. They passed on Shedeur Sanders multiple times, a quarterback I was told they liked as a point guard distributor, at least they were somewhat comfortable with. Passed on him, took Will Howard in the 6th round. So all signs continue to point to Rodgers being in Pittsburgh, but it's his first foray into free agency in his 20-year career, so there will be no bold predictions right now.
And as Rodgers said when he was on the Pat McAfee show, which is the most recent time we really heard from him, he's not in any rush to make anything happen. So we all wait and see.
Plenty of time.
Anything.
He texted me literally right after I got drafted, told me it's time to go to work, congratulated me, and just told me, it's time to work, come here and work.
What did you have to say to him? What did you have to say to him?
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready. I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. And, to be here, like I said, I'm going to be present, but, I'm going to let my presence be known. I'm going to come in here and compete.
He's so much fun. He was great in front of that home crowd at the draft in Green Bay. As we welcome in Rob Domofsky, of course, our Packers reporter who was there today. Rob, how do the Packers plan to use Golden?
Laura, I'm sure you remember Matt LaFleur saying right after they picked Golden that he FaceTimed Jordan Love, and Jordan Love joked that I've got to get that arm loosened up to throw those deep balls to Golden's 4.29 second speed. But in all seriousness, what the Packers love about Golden is his versatility. They think he's more than just a deep threat receiver. Now, I asked LaFleur today, as rookie minicamp started, if he's already started to put things into the offense for Golden, and he said, while he hasn't done that, he did during the evaluation process tell general manager Brian Gutekunst, this is how I envision using him. Obviously, Gutekunst must have liked what he heard because he went ahead and drafted him. But LaFleur said one other thing. He goes, I know that there's going to be something positive that pops up that we're going to see that we didn't see on tape that we'll be able to use with Golden. And he's going to start that process here at rookie minicamp when they hit the practice field tomorrow. Now, one note, Laura, about a veteran, the ongoing saga between the Packers and Jair Alexander. They're all pro cornerback. Is he going to play here? Is he going to get cut? Is he going to get traded? LaFleur did say that Alexander was not here this week for the voluntary in-person team activities. That's interesting to note because Alexander did take part last week when they did things virtually. They kept the players away because of all the stuff around here with the draft and logistically. So Alexander was part of the virtual stuff but was not here in person this week.
Yeah, really interesting to keep an eye on. Jeremy Fowler has an update on that in just a bit. And I must say, Rob, Lambeau's looking gorgeous today, okay, as you well know. All right, the Packers have done their best to put solid pass catchers around Jordan Love over the last 4 drafts. They've taken 7 pass catchers in the first 3 rounds, 5 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. However, Matthew Golden is the first receiver they've drafted in the first round since 2002, and it's the first time they've taken 2 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds in the common draft era. Somebody's going to say, Aaron Rodgers, saying, where was that when I was here? Anyway, Tim, a lot of receivers for Jordan Love. What do you think, though, specifically about the addition of Matthew Golden?
I think it's great, because he's super talented. I mean, just watch it, even the highlights that we were playing there. You see his speed, and I do think he's, more versatile, as Rob Domofsky was, kind of referring in terms of the optimism, in Green Bay of what type of player he can be. And I would say, I actually think Green Bay has had a pretty good receiving core, especially when you factor in, their tight ends and the way that they've played. And so, to me, it really wasn't this glaring area of need, other than to say some of these young, productive wide receivers that they've had, they've been injured. And so because of that, I think, getting a dynamic player who's young, kind of build, into the room, I think should be really exciting for Packers fans. And so, look, they did that, but they also did other things. They still, addressed the offensive line in the 2nd and 7th round. Like, there are other things that they need to do, but I do believe the continuity in Green Bay and what they're building around Jordan Love, look, I think gives you a lot of optimism for how they're going to fare in the division.
Yeah, listen, Tim brings up a lot of good points. That receiving core is going to be one of the best, one of the more young and dynamic receiving cores in the league. I think defensively, they've continued to add pieces there, and I think that defense needs to continue to elevate. But ultimately, this falls on Jordan Love. And when you talk about Jordan Love, you're talking about a guy who's immensely talented. Sometimes can be reckless with the football. And I think if Green Bay ultimately wants to go to where they want to go and vie for a championship and win that NFC North, I think Jordan Love has to play more consistently. No one has ever questioned the talent that he has, but he just needs to be more consistent. If he can do that with all the pieces that's surrounding Jordan Love, this Green Bay Packers team is as good as anyone.
Yeah, D. Wood, the Packers and Jordan Love got help with drafting Matthew Golden in the first round, breaking serious precedent. Hadn't taken a wide receiver since Javon Walker in 2002. Why did they do that? One team source told me he was, quote, too good to pass up, because I was told Golden in the process figured he would be in that sort of 10 to 22 range, as high as the Cowboys, number 12. He was considered one of the finalists among the teams that they were shaking out. He had a top 30 visit with the team. Everything.
Yeah, and lucky for Jordan Love. I think everyone's going to love what Matthew Golden brings to the table. Now, we promised Jeremy an update on Jair Alexander. You heard what Rob Domofsky said. What are you hearing about him right now?
Yeah, Laura, so I was told Alexander and his camp never really expected to be traded, at least up to this point, because in early March around free agency, the team and the players started discussing some options, like, hey, let's leave the lines of communication open. If we can find a trade that makes sense for the team, we'll do that. So the player talked to some teams, the team talked to some opposing teams to see what the market value would be. A lot of those teams had interest, but they wanted to wait until after the draft. And now they're through the draft. There still isn't a lot of momentum for any sort of deal for Alexander, who, despite being a top 10 cornerback in the league for a long time, is due $17.5 million. Durability is a major issue. So the common sense here might just be that both sides can talk about a new reworked package maybe. Yeah. Perhaps the Packers can get some salary cap help, get that number down a little bit if Alexander would be willing to do that. Whether he is or not is remains to be seen.
Again, Rob Domofsky reporting that he was there for virtual meetings that the team had last week during the draft, and then has not been here with the voluntary workouts. We'll keep an eye on that. All right, to our next rookie camp going on today. That's in Philly. The defending champs bolstered their defense with Jahad Campbell and 5 other defenders who are all out on the practice field today. Pretty cool. The Eagles entered the 2025 season looking to become the 10th team ever to repeat as Super Bowl champs. Overall, there have been 16 instances of a team returning to the Super Bowl the season after winning it. The Eagles will have to get back there without their offensive coordinator from last season, of course, Kellen Moore. Damian, Howie Roseman keeps rebuilding the Eagles team in the draft. Is that enough, though, for them to repeat? Because they have lost a lot of guys, too, in free agency and otherwise.
Yeah, listen, some of those guys have graduated from the program, but the one thing that Howie Roseman has always done is a master at restocking. Sometimes with Howie Roseman, he's zigging while everyone is zagging. So he goes out here in the first round, he gets Jahad Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama. And you're talking about, a guy who's just, ultra athletic, fast, comes downhill. And then all the other picks that they added on the defensive side of the football. So, yes, while they've lost some players on the defensive side, but they continue to restock and retool. And the one thing about this Philadelphia Eagles team, they're strong in all the right places that you need to win football games. They're strong in the trenches. They got elite players on the perimeter, and obviously we know the Super Bowl MVP and Jalen Hurts. So, this organization from the top down is one of the elite franchises, and they're going to be one of the front runners in 2025.
Indeed, with the retooling by taking young, talented players on defense. You mentioned Campbell. They now have at least 7 starters on the defensive side of the ball on rookie contracts. And Campbell was just great value. He is a luxury at that point, number 31 or 32 overall, falling to them essentially. I talked to several teams that saw him as a top 10 overall talent in the entire draft. It was essentially a durability issue. How long can he play based on the various injuries he's had? He's got a shoulder issue that could cost him some time. The Eagles figure, hey, if he misses time, it's going to be great for us. That is all good. But Howie Roseman is breaking precedent here. The Eagles had not drafted a true linebacker since 1979 in the first round. They had never done it, didn't prioritize the position, typically didn't pay those players a lot. Now Zach Vaughn got paid, Jahad Campbell in the first round. So they are clearly trusting Vic Fangio after his Super Bowl performance to develop young players at positions he cares about, like linebacker.
That was Jahad Campbell, by the way, on the screen, who you just saw wearing number 30. Tim, there's so many ways that it can go wrong for teams, right? We know how hard it is to even get to the Super Bowl. What's the biggest challenge as the Eagles try to repeat?
I think surviving losing Kellen Moore. The reality is a couple years ago, the Eagles lost both coordinators and they fell apart throughout the season. And I think it was hard for Nick Sirianni to kind of manage the coordinator changes. They obviously got it right a year ago. Vic Fangio's back. We're talking about him developing young players. Look, continuity is important. And so, look, no Kellen Moore when you're coaching Jalen Hurts, I think is, it's a challenge. I think Kellen Moore, what he did a great job of was bring the stuff that he was good at doing, but not abandon the stuff that Jalen had been so successful doing. And so you combine those two things together and you've got a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And so now when you make the change at that, as a play caller and just, the understanding between quarterback and play caller, I just think that can be a significant change. You see some teams really struggle with it, and I think for Philadelphia it ends up being a hurdle if they want to get back to where they were a year ago.
Yeah, listen, if there's one thing that Jalen Hurts has dealt with is a lot of different play callers throughout his career, not only in college, but in the pros. And Tim, you're right. Like, that is something that bears watching. We know the Philadelphia Eagles are a very talented team, across the board. Line of scrimmage, perimeter, Saquon Barkley being, coming back as a 2,000-yard rusher. But anytime you mess up that play caller quarterback chemistry, it's something that you need to watch. But listen, this Philadelphia team, they're strong on both sides of the ball. I think they'll adapt, and there will